What do you get when you go to grandma's house or to your local Elven bakery? Well, you get fruitcake, or Cherrybread, as it's called in Heroes Feast, the official D&D cookbook. So, let's learn about that today on Bob Appetit. For this recipe, we're going to be using 3/4 cups golden raisins, 2 tablespoons of dark or amber rum, 3/4 cup all-purpose flour, half a teaspoon of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, kosher salt, 1/3 cup of packed light brown sugar, 1 1/3 cups of packed dried apricot cut in halves, 3/4 cups dried cherries or cranberries, 3 cups of walnut halves lightly toasted and cooled, 3 eggs, 2 tablespoons of unsulfured molasses, not blackstrap, and a half teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. As the book calls out, in a small microwave-safe bowl, combine the raisins and rum, cover, and microwave until warm, about 1 minute. Set the bowl aside, still covered, until the raisins absorb most of the rum and soften, about an hour, stirring once or twice during that time. Be sure to drain off any excess liquid and drink it if you want. Fruitcakes get a bad rap for being hard, bland, dry, and the culprit is likely raisins, or at least dehydrated fruits. See, as a dehydrated fruit, raisins are going to want to draw in moisture from around them, and in doing so, they're going to turn the rest of the cake dry, or at least take in the flavor and make them bland except for with these little juicy grape pockets. But if they don't draw in any moisture, then they end up getting overly dry, and that turns them into these hard grape rocks. By going ahead and plumping them up with a little bit of liquid, we're going to avoid both of these problems and sneak in a little flavor. Also, keep this in mind if you use something like figs, dates, or other extremely dried fruits. Here, our cherries and our apricots should be fine, plus we don't want to over moisturize. By the way, if you don't want to use alcohol, you can use fruit juice or water in its place. Now preheat the oven to 300 degrees Fahrenheit with the rack in the middle of the oven. Butter a 9 by 5 inch loaf pan. Fold 2 long sheets of parchment paper and lay one crosswise in the pan and lay one lengthwise, pushing the parchment paper into the corners and smoothing the paper so it's flush in the pan. With the ends overhanging all 4 sides of the pan, generously butter the parchment paper in the pan. This will help you lift it later. If you're toasting your own walnuts, bring a pan to medium heat and then set them in there for 2 to 3 minutes, tossing occasionally. You're letting the color darken just a little bit and then make sure to let them cool before use. In a large bowl, whisk together the flour, baking powder, baking soda, half teaspoon of salt, and the brown sugar. Make sure to break up any lumps in the brown sugar. Add the apricots, cherries, and raisins and toss to coat well. Add the walnuts and toss to combine. Fair warning, we're going to delve into some deep explanations on baking soda, baking powder, and why we're using both. So if you don't want to go into that, go ahead and click down below to the next section. All right, let's get into it. Before we can talk about why we're using baking soda and baking powder, we first have to understand what these two things do. Baking soda, aka sodium bicarbonate, aka bicarbonate of soda, is an alkaline base that when combined with an acid causes a breakdown into carbon dioxide and water. This is known as a chemical leavening and produces quick breads, called that because they take an hour or 2, versus slow breads that go through a process of biological leavening, which uses yeast, and can take several hours or several days. Baking powder is baking soda plus a dry acid so that when you just add moisture, boom, reaction. Now, why would you use one instead of the other? Well, baking soda requires an acid, so if your dish doesn't have an acid, or doesn't have enough acid to actually give you leavening, then you need baking powder. Also, having too much baking soda left over after it's dealt with the acids will leave a bitter, nasty, soapy taste in your food, and you don't want that. But baking soda neutralizes an acid, and what this means is it also neutralizes the flavor. So if you wanted that nice, delicious lemon cake to rise, but you used baking soda, now you just kind of have cake. No lemon flavor. Baking powder, on the other hand, by coming with its own equal amounts of acid is already pre-neutralized, so it's not going to eat up any of your other acidic flavors. But what happens if you have too many acidic flavors in your dish? You've got lemon and buttermilk and brown sugar, and you need to dial some of that back. Baking soda can help with that. Also, an interesting thing about baking soda in that it raises the pH balance, it helps to create a maillard reaction. It helps to brown your baked goods, which can add a lot of color and flavor to your dish. Baking powder can't do that because it's already neutralized. All right, so now that we know all of that, let's talk about why you would use both of them. There are 3 key reasons. 1, you have some acids, but not enough. So you have enough acids in your dish to cause a leavening, but not enough to get it to where you want it to be. So now you gotta bring in the baking powder. 2, you've got enough acids, but you don't want to neutralize the flavor. If you were to add enough baking soda to get you leavened, you'll actually turn that beautiful lemon cake into cake. And you don't want that, so you gotta bring in the baking powder. But now you want flavor. And the problem is that if you just use baking powder, you're not gonna get that maillard reaction from the pH balance shift, so you wanna bring in the baking soda. It's the use of both of these that is gonna help you get flavor, leavening, and color. Woo! Let's get to baking. In a small bowl, beat together the eggs, molasses, and vanilla until well blended. Add to the fruit nut mixture and, using a flexible spatula, fold and mix to combine and coat all the dried fruit and nut pieces with the batter. Make sure there are no pockets of dry ingredients left at the bottom of the bowl. Scrape the mixture into the prepared pan and smooth it into an even, compact layer. Bake for about an hour, rotating the pan 180 degrees halfway through. If at that time the top is browning too much, tent loosely with foil. When the cake is a deep golden brown, transfer the pan to a wire rack and let cool completely. Grab the parchment paper overhangs and remove the loaf from the pan. With a serrated knife, cut into thin slices and serve. Leftovers can be wrapped and well stored in an airtight container at room temperature for about a week. One of the things I love the most about the Elven recipes in this book is that in reality you could change out almost all of the fruit and nuts in this dish and it'll still work. But a quick call out that they do make on this recipe is if you are going to change out the fruits, you want to make sure to cut them all into nice small bite-sized pieces. Otherwise, you'll end up with massive clumps of dried fruit. You don't want that. All right, let's taste this thing. A really nice, deep, rich flavor. Probably because of the higher pH balance allowing that browning and maillard reaction. We've got nice, plump, juicy raisins that help to bring in some moisture to this cake. And we've also got a great leavening that's happened just in between here. It's like there's just enough bread to hold this thing together, and that's it. It is really nice. And because it's a quick bread, you can make this super fast. So if you make it once and then end up eating it before you finish the episode and need to cook it again, easy enough. The only thing I would add to this is maybe a little bit of cinnamon butter. But what would you add and what fruits would you use inside of your cherry bread? Leave a comment down below. And as always, like and subscribe. And remember, study at the dinner table. We'll catch you next time here on Bon Appetit.